Thank you. Yeah.
All right, welcome to the Writers Lounge podcast, and welcome,
Thank you.
David. How are you?
Good. How you doing?
I'm doing great. David is a transgressive exploitation horror gore writer. Did I say all that right?
Yep. That's what I call myself on
Okay.
Facebook.
What we like to do is start off by asking, when did you actually start writing? So for us, both me and Jay, we started when we were kids, like fifth, sixth grade, we're playing around with writing. When did you actually start getting into writing?
That's actually the same for me. When I was very young, I used to watch the Brady Bunch, and then I would get together with a friend, and
Right.
we would write X-rated episodes of the Brady Bunch that would involve, like,
Oh,
incest, rape, murder, that type of thing. And that was how I kind of got it started writing. And then professionally, the first time I submitted something was in 2003. So I've been
wow.
writing now professionally for about like 20 years. But when I first
Hmm.
started writing, I wasn't writing books. I was submitting stories to like short story anthologies and magazines and stuff like that. And it's only been the past couple of years that I started putting out paperbacks.
Okay. And you're an indie author, correct?
Yeah, I'm self-published. Yeah,
Self-published, right on. So the book that I read first was This Book Hates You 2.0. Did I say
yeah,
that right? Was that the
yep,
title?
yep.
Yeah, This Book Hates You 2.0. Wow, I really liked it. I
Thank you.
really
Thank
did. And I was surprised because splatterpunk just would not be the genre that I would go into the store looking for, normally. But I like to read books like that. Um, you said that in your book that the book is its own entity, like it comes alive. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of writers when they're writing something, they'll outline it in detail. Um, I don't, I don't ever outline, and the reason for that is I'll be writing, and then a character will just do something that I didn't see coming, and but they take on their own life and they do their own things, and sometimes they do things I don't want them to do, and that it can be a problem sometimes. But yeah, I go
Mhm.
into writing a story, having just a general idea of what I want to write about, and then not having an outline, I can just write whatever comes to mind, and then once I start writing, the characters come to life in my mind, and they start acting on their own.
Right, like the characters are writing the book for you almost.
Yeah, that's what it feels like. Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Right. So you don't actually outline it. So what inspired you to actually start becoming an author? What made you say, you know what, I'm going to publish this book and get it out to the public to read? What was that inspiration?
Well, I've always loved writing and I love reading, and I've always wanted to be a writer, and that's what I've wanted to do. My life kind of took a different course, and so for a lot of time, I spent a lot of time not writing, but I had another job. Um, but I was a practicing attorney, and which I hated, and it's such it requires so much time that I didn't really have that much time to to do all the writing I wanted to do.
Mhm.
But I still made the time for myself. Um, but I think it was, I guess the early part of the century, like around 2003. I decided I read some stuff that was very extreme and that I'd never seen anything like it before. There was this
Mhm.
magazine called Brutal Tales, and I was like, wow, there's other people out there who are writing the stuff that I like to write and that I like to read, and that I'm not able to find it. And so when I read that, that was a real inspiration for me, and I realized that there were people who wrote the same stuff as I did, and they were popular at it. So that and a couple other things just made me start writing and submitting short stories. And when I first started, I was much more prolific than I am now, and I was
Mhm.
submitting a couple short stories a week, and I've had like probably several hundred stories published. Um, and then I guess about 10, 15 years ago, I decided I wanted to be a paperback writer. I was kind of sick of having my stuff just being available on the Kindle, because I like to read a book. I like to like highlight the book and stuff and write notes in it and everything. And you don't
Mhm.
have that with the Kindle. And all my stuff was being published just in e format. So I said I got to start publishing paperback so I can have an actual physical book to hold.
Uh, so, because I also am an indie author, how are your sales? I mean, above average, more than what you thought, or
Um, they're not that great, but the thing is that they're improving. I decided
Mhm.
last year that this year is going to be the year where I kind of try to make it. And so I had two major things that I worked on last year, and I released one on January 1st and one on January 8th, and then I heavily promoted them. So this January was like my most successful month as a writer, and I've this is the second podcast I've been on in a couple of weeks, so I guess
hey,
people are
right on.
finding out more about me. Yeah.
Mhm. That, and you know what? This is what I found is the writing isn't so much the hard part; it's the marketing that's the hard part.
Oh yeah, yeah. I'm not. So
Trying to.
that's why my I think my book sells better if I was a better marketer, or if I had a publisher who could do that type of stuff for me.
Mhm.
But I do like having control over everything. Um, so that means having to do my own
Feel
publicity. Um,
that.
and I don't have that much money, so I can't afford like an Amazon ad campaign or anything like that. So mostly what I do is I just go to social media, and I've social media sites on Facebook and Twitter and everything, and I just post all my books, and then I try to engage with other horror writers and horror readers, and just
Mhm.
try to tell them about my writing and my books.
I feel like you're.
Well, it's a variety of places, but I would say I'm with Stephen King. I have very very vivid dreams, and a lot of my stories I take elements from my dreams and use them. I think the main source I use for material is I'm interested in true crime and serial killers. So I read a lot of true crime books. I read a lot of serial killer books. See a lot of movies and documentaries, and it's always been something that's interesting to me, and it's been something that I've wanted to write about. I like to get inside the mind of a psychopath or a serial killer, and sort of show the audience how that person thinks, because I think it's entertaining and it's also scary, and it can be fun and interesting as well. Um, so I tend to write very dark material, serial killer type stuff. Um, and that in part of the influence is just reading true crime books. The other part is just has to do with when I was born. I was born in 1972, so I started becoming interested in like current events and stuff when I was, maybe like 9 or 10, which was the early 80s. And that was like the big time for serial killers. Like no one knew what a serial killer was in like the early 70s. And it was a new term that was coined in the 70s. And then all of a sudden there was, Ted Bundy and John Wayne Gacy and Jeffrey Dahmer and Richard Ramirez, and so many more. And it just dominated the news when I was 10 or 11, and I was reading stuff like just reading the newspaper and reading about this new phenomenon of serial killing. And I just was found myself just fascinated by it. And I really devoured the news. And when I was in like fourth or fifth grade, that was around the time of John Wayne Gacy. So there was all these rumors people had. Nobody really knew what the truth was because we were just little kids. But people were spreading rumors saying, look out because there's a naked clown going around selling ice cream, and if you buy ice cream from him, he'll kill you. And I mean, that was my childhood, was hearing stuff like that. So just from a very early age, I had a lot of uh, horror or crime influence. Um, and then a lot of stories I write, I have no idea how I come up with them. Like sometimes I write a story and I'm like surprised that I was able to write it. And so some of my ideas, I don't know where they come from. It just comes from having, I guess, like a vivid imagination, and uh, just trying to picture weird things. And yeah, so yeah, that's the answer to that.
Do you do you have like a certain place or a setting that inspires you to write? Like a gory room that has pictures, or just go into a room and write, or to go to a coffee house maybe and write? I don't know.
I write in two different places in my house. One is where I am right now, um, and then upstairs, I'm down in the basement now. Upstairs, I have an office that I share with my wife, and I have another computer there. So I do a lot of my writing in that room and this room. I like this room better. This room is more kind of inspirational for me because it's filled with books, and there's books everywhere, and I have a lot of like horror movie paraphernalia and stuff in here. So I'm kind of surrounded by, by books and by like creepy stuff and everything. So
Right.
this is probably right where I am now. Is probably where I prefer to write.
And you said you like to read a lot. Who's your favorite author that you like to read?
Um, I have a lot of favorite writers. Probably the writer who I like the most and who got me into writing horror in the first place and into reading it is Stephen King. I read Christine when I was in fourth grade, and it just changed my life. I had never read anything like that, and after that, I couldn't read any children's books anymore. They were just too tame. So Stephen King is a huge influence. And then I like a lot of splatterpunk writers, like Richard Lehman is a huge influence. He's one of my favorite writers. Edward Lee is a great writer. Raph James White. Um, there's just a lot more. I can't. I'm having trouble thinking of some right now. Like Peter Straub. I'm a big fan of Clive Barker. Um, People like that. Like sort of.
So
I
you
like
not
mainstream
reading.
horror, and then I like splatterpunk horror, but I do like mainstream horror as well. So I'm a huge Stephen King fan.
Okay. But even your book, I would even put beyond horror. I was talking to Jay. I said you got horror. You have Stephen King horror, and then you have stuff like Saw, that movie Saw. It's not
Yeah,
really a horror movie, but it's gore. And when I
yeah,
read your book, it's very you can visualize it, and it was gore. It's like, oh my goodness. And I also read, and I don't know if this is the book that's closest to your heart, but the one that we're going to be promoting a little bit more is "Hurting My Toys: A Spiritual Suicide. Is that correct? Is that the name of it?
Yes.
Okay, I'm gonna be honest. I read part of it. I didn't read all of it. I got a whole lot of other stuff I'm reading and working on, but I'm gonna say I read probably 60% of that book. And again, wow, it was.
Thank you.
I mean, even just the first few pages, I was just like, I cannot believe this. Like, this guy, he's very visual, on what he wants you to see and stuff. I did not have a problem wondering what you were trying to let me see in these books. So, on this, when did you write this book, Hurting My Toys?
Well, originally it's based on a short story, and I wrote the short story like in like 2003. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then there's this book publisher. They're called Red Room Press now, but they used to be called Comet Press. And I had a good relationship with them, and I sent them the story, and I said, if I expand this into a book, would you be willing to publish it? And they said yes. So I immediately, and this was probably 12, 15 years ago. I immediately just sat down and turned the story into a book. It didn't take long at all, just because I had all these ideas for it and everything. Um, and I had a really great time writing it, and I really want to write a sequel to it as well. But I have a couple other projects planned first, so if I do write a sequel, it won't be for a while.
All right. So, you've written several stories, several different kind of books, published in magazines. What's your favorite scene that you've written? Can you share that with us?
My favorite scene, yeah, it's from Hurting My Toys, and I like the scene because it's so disgusting and it's so over the top that I love reading it and I love hearing people's reactions about it. But basically, there's the character is a serial killer, and he's with a pregnant woman, and he rips her stomach open and he rips the fetus out, and he turns the fetus into a crack pipe. So he sticks like a little stick in it, and he puts a piece of crack on the baby's head, and he smokes crack using the baby as a crack pipe, the way some people will use an apple to smoke pot out of. Um, and then
Oh, I have no idea what that is. Go ahead, though.
then the fetus like implodes, and he inhales and sucks in the whole fetus. And then there's this
Hmm.
woman tied up being forced to watch, and she won't watch. So the killer says to her, if you don't watch, I'm gonna sew your eyelids open, so that you have to watch. And she still refuses to open her eyes. And the killer is also a drug addict, so he's been smoking crack the whole time, and he's all shaky and everything. And he tries to sew her eyelids open, and he keeps missing because his hands are shaking. So he keeps jabbing her in the eyeball with a pin. Um, and I like that just because I'm like creeped out with stuff about my eyeballs. I have like a huge eyeball phobia, so that was a really hard
Right.
thing for me to write about. But I think it came out well, and a lot of people have told me that they like that scene a lot.
How's your wife like your writing? Like, would she read something for the first time that you've written, like that scene, before public read it? I'm sure she read it before anybody else, correct?
Yeah, she hasn't read all my stuff, but she's read a lot of it, and she knows my style. Yeah. Um,
Yeah, she
yeah,
did.
she likes it. I mean, I'm surprised, but yeah, she's not. She reads mostly
Right.
nonfiction books, but she does read my stuff, and I ask her to read and give me criticisms, and she does help me with my writing a lot. Um,
Right.
but I know that that's not the type of writing she would prefer to read. I mean, she was more into like historical books and stuff like that.
Right. You include any kind of like, oh, go ahead.
just wanted to add one thing that it just takes, it takes under a second to subscribe. So, I mean, if you're watching this, please subscribe.
Right. Invite your friends to subscribe. Back to the show. All right, David, here's a good question. Do you include like a hidden message or a little Easter eggs in your story for people to
Um,
find?
Not really. I like it when other authors do it, and I do it once in a while. Like I'll reference, one story in. I'll write another story, and I'll reference a story in it. But in general, I don't do that. Most of my stories are like standalone. They have different characters, and I don't really do Easter eggs that often. But I do it once in a while. But in general, I don't do that.
Right. Okay. All right. So, what out of all the books or all the stories you have written, which character do you relate to the most?
Oh, that's a tough question because I write a lot of really horrible people that I absolutely cannot.
That's why I was wondering if you related to any of them.
There's very few of them that I can relate to because I'm fascinated by serial killers and things like that, but um, it stops there. I don't like them. Um, but the book I'm working on now, it's called Rotten Valley High, and it's about this high school student who's bullied, and he gets like a lot of torment, and it's not just bullying, but it's like hardcore like torture. Um, and
Right.
he's the first character I think I've written that I actually really like a lot because he's all around like a good person. Just terrible things keep happening to him, and he's just constantly being tormented and punished, and humiliated, and he's not a bad person. So um, that this book is kind of different than my other books that I'm writing, and that's the character's name is Jonathan, and he's the character I like the most, and that I could probably relate to the most. I wasn't bullied a lot in high school, but I just had the regular amount of bullying. But I did have some. So
Yeah, we all did, didn't we? Hey,
yeah.
so if you could collaborate with anybody, David, as an author, any author, who would you want to collaborate with?
Probably Edward Lee. I'm a huge fan of Edward Lee, and then the reason I found out about him when I started writing like a long time ago, people would compare me to him, and they'd say, "Oh, this reminds me of Ed Lee," and so that immediately made me curious. I started reading his books, and I realized that when
Mhm.
someone compares me to Ed Lee, that's like the ultimate compliment because he's just this amazing writer. He's very prolific. I mean, he writes a lot of books. I think he's got like 60 books out, and he's released like just maybe like 10 just in the past couple of years. And his books they're really gory, but they're very funny at the same time. And I like that combination of gore and humor. And I try, not in all my writing, but in a lot of my writing, I try to incorporate humor into it. And I think he's kind of like the king of that, of just really disgusting stuff, but it's so disgusting it's kind of funny, and just total weird sex stuff, and just extreme, mayhem and gore. And so he's probably right now he's probably my favorite writer. So yeah, I would love to have the opportunity to write something with him.
Well, maybe he's watching and he'll get a hold of you. He's on Facebook, right? That's what we'll tell him. David, get a hold of David on Facebook on Messenger. So if you had one book that you could recommend, to everyone? You only had one book to recommend. It could be yours, could be anybody's. What one book would you recommend and say you have to read this book?
Um, well, I'd like to, recommend one of my own books, but probably if I had to recommend a book and say that like this is like the greatest book I've ever read, it's
Mhm.
120 Days of Sodom by Marquis de Sade. I read that when I was younger, and it was a huge influence on me. And the book is like
Mhm.
it's really long. It's like almost 1,000 pages, and it's just nonstop like depravity. And I just never experienced anything like it. And it's a couple hundred years old, but it still stands out today. It's still just as offensive and disgusting, but also it's very funny too.
Mhm.
So if you're gonna read one book, 120 Days of Sodom by Marquis de Sade, I would say read that book. An amazing book. It doesn't have much of a plot. It's just one perverse activity occurring after another for hundreds of pages.
For 1,000 pages. Oh my God.
Yeah.
So, do you have a favorite character out of out of any book? Do you have a favorite character?
A favorite character out of any book. I guess I like. I'm a big Hannibal Lecter fan. I always have been. I like the films, but I like the books better. And I
Hmm.
like that. He's this malicious serial killer, but he's also incredibly smart and cultured, and articulate, and it's just a very interesting person, and he's kind of a mass of contradictions. And
Uh-huh.
I'm hoping that there's going to be another Silence of the Lambs book, or because there's 4 books in the series, and I'm hoping he'll write another one. But that's probably one of my favorite characters. Would be Hannibal
So, how
Lecter.
did you like Cannibal Rising? That
I,
one.
I loved it. I loved all of them. I know a lot
It
of people
helped you
didn't.
understand the character more, didn't it?
Yeah, and I know a
I
lot of
felt.
people didn't like it as much, and it didn't have Anthony Hopkins in it. But it's
Right.
it's an amazing story, and it's very intense, and it's hard to watch. So yeah, I loved Hannibal Rising.
Is there any sacrifices that you have made to focus on your writing in your life? Any personal sacrifices?
Um, well, mainly, retiring from working as an attorney, and losing all my source of income has been a
Hmm.
big challenge. And I used to have a somewhat decent paying job, and I decided that it was more important to be a writer, even if it's not going to, it doesn't really help pay the bills. So that's the biggest sacrifice I've made is retiring from regular work, just to focus on writing, and just to write every day like it's a job, and write 7 days a week, and try to write most of the day.
You, do you have a word count, like a goal every day?
Oh, no. Some people have a say, you should write like 2,000 words a day, but a lot of times I'm editing, and I'll end up writing like adding no words at all because I'll just be cutting stuff out and rearranging stuff.
Hmm.
So, in terms of, because I do so much editing of my writing, I don't always write a maximum or a minimum number of words a day, but I do like the goal of trying to write at least 2,000 words a day. I just haven't been able to because I've been focusing on editing the book that I'm working on. Um, but if I can get a couple thousand words out a day, or if I can spend a couple hours editing, that's a good day.
We have a question from the UK. What is the big difference between writing a screenplay and a book? Have you ever written a screenplay?
Yeah, I've written a couple. I've never had a screenplay that I've written by myself that's been made into a film, but I've co-written 3 or 4 films, where I didn't, or I wrote like part of the film, or like a scene, or like I wrote for one film that was a anthology film, and I wrote the wraparound segment. It's completely different. Screenplay writing is, it has to be done like an exact certain way, and um, it's much easier, in my opinion, to write a book than a screenplay, because a screenplay you're kind of limited to just having people's dialogue, and then what they're doing, and you can't really get into. It's harder to get into someone's brain and to figure out what they're thinking and why they're doing what they're doing, and to get to the motive of what they're doing. So that's always just a big challenge if I'm working on a screenplay. Um, and I actually haven't worked on one in a couple of years. But yeah, the screenplays are tough to write because there's a formula that you have to kind of obey if you want to,
Mhm.
have any chance of someone, making your screenplay into a film. Um, and I just, I don't have. I'm just better as a regular writer than a screenplay writer. I'd love to be a screenplay writer, and I still work at it. But I focus mostly on regular writing. For me, it's just easier. It comes naturally.
Right. I did a screenplay one time, movie score, and yeah, I just did it because I wanted to challenge myself, right? Just to say I did it,
Yeah.
and yeah, I don't like it. It's a much harder writing style. It doesn't free flow like you want it to, like you would with a novel or a short story. Do you have you ever experienced writer's block?
No. There's a couple of reasons for that. Um, but usually I have a bunch of different things I'm working on. So if I'm in a story and I don't know what to write, I'll just pick up
Hmm.
something else that I've started. So I have like, I don't know how many stories that I've written, like half of them. And
Hmm.
if ever I can't think of an idea, then I'll just go pick up one of my stories and just, finish it. But usually I have an idea for, a novel that I'm working on. Um, and it's kind of almost like
I kind of do the same thing. I have other projects that I'm working on, like three different projects. And if you happen to have writer's block for all three, guess what? Pick up a book, just start reading. You know,
Yeah, that's great advice. And I read as much as I write, probably. I mean, I read like a couple hours a day. I love reading.
right? If you never get burnt out,
No.
you don't get burnt out. No. Okay, well that's good. And do you when you publish your book as an indie author, have you tried to go traditional publisher?
Yeah, the Hurting My Toys was originally put out by a publisher, but they only released it like in electronic format, and I prefer paperback books, and I could not find a publisher who would publish me in paperback format.
Hmm.
So all my books are and my short stories are not a lot of all my books, and a lot of my short stories are just self-published. I just publish them on Amazon Kindle.
You? I hear a lot of people when they find out you're an author, they go, "Oh, I want to write a book," or "Oh, I've been wanting to write a book." What is something that you would tell someone, or what advice would you give them to a person that's writing their first book?
Um, but to make sure that they're enjoying it, because I mean, it's there's no reason. I don't think you should be writing if it's something that like it's something you don't enjoy doing. I mean, some people just do
Hmm.
not like creative writing. So first you have to have like a passion for creation and everything. And if you have that, that's really, I think, all you need. Everything comes from there. Just having a passion for what you're writing about, and making sure that what you're writing about is something that you know about and that you feel very strongly about, and creating characters that you believe in, or characters that, on the other hand, that despise. Um,
Hmm.
but it requires, I think, like a level of enthusiasm, just being interested in what you're writing about.
Have you ever thought about writing another genre? Any
Um,
other genre besides splatterpunk?
yeah, actually, I do write in several other genres. I've written a couple erotica stories, and I like crime and mystery stories. So I've written some crime stories, some mystery type stories, and then I write. Uh, bizarro fiction, and that's, if you don't know bizarro, it's just fiction that's just weird, kind of for the sake of being weird. And if you've ever seen the movie Eraserhead, it's kind of all
Mhm.
bizarro fiction. It's kind of based on that film because it doesn't make logical sense. So I like to write stuff that's just weird, and bizarre, and that instead of like shocking people or whatever, it makes people just be like, "What the hell am I, reading? What's going on?" But they want to keep reading and find out. So I like to
Mhm.
write, bizarre stuff. But almost everything I write, even the stuff that I write that's funny, uh, does tend to be, morbid and dealing with, like dark issues.
Is there any characters of yours that you would want to meet in real life?
Um, Probably not. No.
No.
um,
Yeah, because they're all crazy, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I write about people that I specifically really wouldn't want to meet. I'm just interested in like finding out about them. It's just like, some people, I would like to meet them and talk to them. Some people I'd rather watch a documentary about them and not actually want to meet them. I find them interesting, but I don't want to actually meet them. And most of my characters are like that. You have to have a likable character in a story, um, but the characters that I write about in most detail are pretty awful people that I definitely would not want to. I'd be terrified to meet them, actually.
Right. Well, is there any character in your stories that you regret creating?
No, I can't think of anything I've written that I regret writing. Um, I guess the only regrets I have is that when I started writing, I was submitting stuff that wasn't, that I could have spent more time on. Like I didn't spend enough time on a story. Like I would write a story and I would edit it once when I really should have edited it like a couple times. And so I've had some stories published that, had flaws in it and that weren't, really well edited.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, so I have some stories that I'm not, older stories that I'm not as proud of.
So you don't you edit yourself? You don't give it to anybody else to read and edit?
Oh, no, I have a close friend, and he's a writer also, and he edits my stuff for me, and he's a huge help. His name's Chris, and I give him credit in my books. And the
Mhm.
next book I'm putting out, I'm gonna have an advertisement for one of his books, in the back. So he's a big help, because a lot of times when I'm writing, I'll be inconsistent. Like I'll have someone talk about how their father is dead, and then a couple scenes later they'll talk about how their father's in a mental institution. So I make continuity errors, and he always
Mhm.
picks them up. Um, and I'm seeing a question right now about the anatomy poster behind me, and
Yeah,
yes,
I was just gonna ask you that next.
that's
Okay.
I have it there for a reason. When I like to make gory stuff as realistic as possible. So
So you
you know
use that as reference.
yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, that's good. That means you do your research when you're writing, you know? Is there, so when you write, you said that like you don't really set up an outline. Your characters kind of write the story for you, correct?
Yeah.
Has the character, because I kind of do the same thing. I try to do an outline, but it never works out for me. Uh, is there, does it ever surprise you where the story goes? Like, oh my God, I can't believe the character's doing this. Can't believe my
Yeah.
fingers just typed that.
Yeah, and when it happens, it's a great thing because it's like a real creative moment when all of a sudden you're writing what you had something that you couldn't imagine, and then all of a sudden you're writing it, and it's something that people do stuff that you don't expect them to do, and I have my characters do the same thing, and a lot of times
Hmm.
what they'll do will surprise me. And then sometimes I'll have to think about if I want to erase that and then write something differently, or else a lot of times I'll keep it. But yeah, that happens definitely.
What's the most enjoyable part of writing for you?
Um, when I'm just starting a story out, and I don't know how it's going to end or how long it's going to be, or if it's going to be a short story or a novel. But just when I first start writing and I first start introducing the main characters and setting up some gore scenes, um,
Mhm.
just 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 free writing is what I like best. And then on the contrary, the thing I like least about writing is editing. Just because my stuff really needs to be edited because I make a lot of like little continuity mistakes and stuff. And editing is a real pain. And I can go like 3 weeks editing and not add like a single new word to the what I'm working on. I'm just
Mhm.
taking stuff out, and I don't like taking stuff out. A lot of times I have to take out stuff from my books that I like. It just doesn't make sense where it is, so it just has to be removed. So I like just free writing when I don't have a specific plot in mind, and then I don't like editing as much.
Do you write like let's just say for the rough draft? I mean, obviously as writers we type everything, but do you ever use longhand when you're writing?
Yeah, if I'm not in front of my computer, um, I'll just write on whatever. Like I have stuff I've written on like napkins and stuff. Like if I'm at a restaurant and I have an idea, I'll just pick up a napkin, and I always carry a couple of pens with me. And now I always keep like a little pad of paper with me. But before that, I used to use like just slips of paper or whatever I could find, just because I would get
Mhm.
ideas when I'd be out and not working. Um, so yeah.
Do you ever keep those? Those could be worth the money someday, David.
Yeah, I keep everything. It's kind of a problem actually because I have just too much
Mhm.
stuff to go through it all.
Right. Hey, we have a question from Claudia. It says, "Who is your greatest influence in your writing?"
I'd have to go with Stephen King because he was the person who got me into a couple things. He got me into horror. He also got me into loving reading because Christine was when I read Christine. That was the first Stephen King book. I loved it. I mean, I enjoyed it so much, and I realized at the time when I read it, I'm like, this is for me. I love horror, and this is what I want to spend my life pursuing. So I mean, Stephen King is just I can't underestimate how much of an influence he is on me. I try to read everything he puts out, and when I first started reading, um, he was just he's always ever since he put out his first book, he's been like the biggest writer. But I just think most of his books are just incredible, and they're just eh, he's just a huge influence on me in terms of not just horror, but in terms of eh, sparking my love for both reading and writing. So Stephen
All right.
King.
So Christine was your the first book you read that you liked by Stephen King. What's your second favorite Stephen King book? Number two on the Stephen King list.
Probably Pet Cemetery. My
Pet
favorite
Sematary.
Stephen King books are like his first couple, like his first dozen books, maybe. I like
Mhm.
those the best. I still love what he's writing now, but Christine and Pet Cemetery are definitely two of my favorites.
Right on. All right. So the book we want to focus on that you want us to promote a little bit more, and you have a lot of books out there. I like the one. This book hates you 2.0, and but we're going to promote hurting my toys, spiritual suicide. Could you go into it a little bit more for the people that may have missed what that might be about? Tell us a little bit of what that's about.
Okay, well, I guess more than anything else, it's about mental illness. It's told from the first person point of view, and the lead character is a serial killer, um, and a drug addict, um, and completely out of his mind. And he believes that he's God. He believes he's the only person who exists in the universe, and he believes that his God powers have been taken away, and that the only way to get them back and to get control of the universe again is to cause as much suffering and death as possible. So it's basically him just torturing and killing people so that he can become God again. So I try to get into the point of view of someone who is is crack. So I tried to get the point of view of someone who was both a serial killer and a crack addict, and I was kind of influenced by Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, who was a cocaine using serial killer. But just adding the drug element to an already insane character just makes him even that much more insane. So the book is just about this. It's from the point of view of this guy, and he's just absolutely insane. And what he writes, you can't really tell if he's hallucinating or making it up, or if it's a fantasy, or if it's something that actually happened, or a memory, or what. So it's definitely a surreal book. You don't know a lot of times what's actually real and what's going on, just because you're only getting the information from his point of view, and his point of view is so skewed because he's so he's so mentally ill.
Mm-hmm. So I want to know how you stay motivated on your writing projects because I think I would be depressed after a little while writing splatterpunk like that all the time. Like, do you stay motivated or does it ever bring you down?
No, I stay motivated. This type of material, it doesn't bring me down at all. I find it interesting. Sometimes I'll read a true crime book and I'll read something that's really terrible, and then I'll kind of have to stop for a while. But
Hmm.
writing about this type of stuff doesn't get me down. I enjoy writing about it. I think it's fun, and it can be fun to read about it as well. So
Do
I
you,
don't.
do you give yourself deadlines when you're writing? Like, you're on this next project that you're working on. Have you given yourself a date that I want to have my first rough draft done by this time?
No, I never do deadlines. That's part of why I like not having a publisher, and writing for myself, is that I can do it on my own time. I don't want to rush things. Um, I try to give
Nobody
myself like
telling you what to do, right?
yeah.
That's what I'm
I try to
talking
have a
about. I already
general
like you, Dave.
nice. Yeah, I try to have a general goal. Like I'll say I'd like to finish this book, by the end of the year. Um, but yeah, otherwise, yeah.
Here's a question that we haven't asked actually anybody else on the show, and I am kind of curious. What software do you use when you're writing?
Just Microsoft Word.
Microsoft Word? Do you format everything there, or do you let Amazon format it?
I do the formatting. I used to hire people to format, and then I went onto YouTube and I watched some tutorials, and I learned how to
Mhm.
format for myself so that I didn't have to pay someone to do it. So yeah,
Right.
I did the formatting, but some is I will hire someone to do the formatting if it's complicated.
Is, well, you thought it was complicated, but it really isn't that hard, is it?
Uh, it can be difficult. I have a lot of problems sometimes, so
Mhm.
yeah. And I just saw a question, but I didn't get to read it.
Yeah, a question came up. It says, David, do you study psychology to align the mental illness with characters in your horror books? And do your ideas come from nightmares or personal experience?
I definitely read a lot of psychology um, to get a good background on it, but a lot of it does come from personal experience. I do suffer from some mental illness issues, um, and a lot of my friends have been like serious like substance abusers. I've had a couple of friends who've overdosed, um, and I've had some. I have PTSD. I've had some pretty horrible things happen to me. Um, and so that's part of it. And then I find psychology interesting, so I'm always trying to read like psychology books and just trying to help myself get into the mindset of a maniac.
So And I'm going back to because I read the complete story of this book, HU 2.0. I read the complete book, so that's why I keep going back to that one. How do you feel as the author that you gave me nightmares? How does that make you feel? Huh?
Um, I mean, that's good because I mean that's what I'm trying to do. I mean, if I give someone a nightmare, then I've done my job. Because I want to
Right.
be an entertainer, and the way I want to entertain people is by scaring them. So, if I can, scare someone, that's a good thing.
And you've actually, I think you put that like in the introduction or right toward the end. This book is going to give you nightmares, and it's written to screw you up, and because the book is talking like it's alive to you, right? So
Yeah,
it's letting you know right from the get go that, hey man, this is fucked up, and you're probably gonna have bad dreams from it, and you were absolutely right. Kudos to you.
thank you.
So
Thank you.
yeah. So I'm wondering, we let's see if we have any other questions on there from other people. So do you reread other books to help inspire you? So we know you read books, but do you reread the same book over and over sometimes to inspire you?
Yeah, absolutely. If I like a book, I'll read it more than once. There's this book. It's called Endless Night by Richard Lehman, who's after Stephen King. He's probably my favorite horror writer, and I probably read
Mhm.
it uh, not that many times. But I've read it like 5 times probably, and it just always inspires ideas in me. And it's a fun book to read. It's pretty, it's a dark and brutal book, but the way the author writes it, it's like fun and exciting to read. He's got his
Mhm.
own style, so I read Richard Lehman books, over and over again, and then with Stephen King and some of the other bigger writers like Clive Barker, I'll read their stuff multiple times.
Right on. Do you which are there any books that you wish that you have written that someone else wrote? You can't pick Stephen King. Got to pick
Um,
somebody else.
I originally started writing this book when I was in high school. I didn't finish it, but I wrote like 100 pages, and it was kind of an American Psycho type plot line. And then when the book American Psycho came out and I read it, I was like, "Damn! I wish I had written this. I wish I had finished the story." I mean, what I had written was nowhere near as good as American Psycho. I mean, that's just a classic. Um,
Mhm.
but that's a a huge influence on me. And yeah, when I read that, I was like, "Damn! I wish I had written this book."
Right. I know. Here's the thing, like when we're talking about um, books that inspired you, like there's a book I've written all sorts of genres. I've written like romance and I wrote like a horror comedy thing, and I'm working on some other stuff. I got theology books types that I've done, but Into the Wild, it was a movie, and for some reason I could just read that book over and over, and I don't know why. It just inspires me. Um, the way it was written about the characters in that book, um, and it's actually a true story. It's not even a fictional book. So you said that you don't really have any. Uh, you sacrificed your career almost, like you focus because writing as an indie author, for the most part, we're not rich,
No.
right? We're not rich people. But what how do you manage that financial risk that you're taking, to focus on just your writing? Like, do you have like a
Well,
side hustle or something?
I mean, when I was working, I did try to save up, some money, and I'm very lucky because my wife works. And she's an attorney, so she gets paid very well. So
Hmm.
that helps me. Um, when we first started going out, acting as an attorney full time, and she was, still in law school. So I was kind of supporting us, and then things kind of switched about 2 years ago when I stopped writing. She became like the main financial support, and what I'm trying to do is take things back again so that I'm contributing more financially to the household. But a lot of it has to do with my wife. She's a moral support, and also because of her job she's able to pay for things, and we have good health insurance and that type of thing. So I'm lucky in that way.
Do you have any self-doubt as a writer? Do you ever doubt yourself? Like, oh man, this sucks.
um I've written stories, yeah, where I've said this is crap, and I've stopped writing it, and I just thrown the story out and started over again. But everything that I've written that I finished, I like it. I don't have any stories that I'm not proud of, but I've certainly written some stuff that was not good enough to finish or to publish.
Okay, all right. So you don't really struggle with that. And how do you handle? Uh, well, you haven't, as your editor. You said you have a friend that helps you edit,
Yeah,
right? So that friend, I'm sure, gives you critique, constructive criticism.
yeah.
Do you take that well, or have you ever been like, I'm leaving it. I'm gonna do what I want.
No, I listen to him very seriously because I know that hold on a second. Something probably on the computer. I know that if I don't do what he tells me to do, my writing is not going to be as good. I mean, he helps me be a better writer.
Hmm.
So, and other editors I've used before, like when I submitted to like a anthology, and they'll have me edit my story. It almost always helps. Having someone else look at it and make suggestions helps. And I'm not like a super egotistical person who thinks no one can tell me what to write or what to change. I'm not going to listen to anybody. I definitely
Right.
will. If someone's a professional editor and they say you could have done this a different way, I'll definitely will listen to that.
And but also that's why you're an indie author, so you don't have to listen to publishers. Because I've heard if you go through a traditional publisher, they could just change the title of your book, even. You know,
Yeah, so I wouldn't want that. But
because the title is like your baby, isn't it? Like I had someone tell me, "Oh, well, maybe you should change the title of this particular book," and I was like, "Yeah, that can't do that though." You know, like I don't know, it's like
yeah,
naming a kid. You can't change the name of your kid, right? I don't know.
exactly. Yeah, it's like having a kid. You don't want to. Can't just change his name.
Right. So let me ask you. Usually, let's see if there's any more questions before I ask this final question. I'm going to look on the live chat here and see if there's any. I'm going to see in the studio chat if there's any. And my question to you, David, is let me make sure. All right. So, my question to you, David, is there a quote or an inspirational quote of yours or anybody's that you would like to share with the audience?
I have a quote. It's not inspirational in any sense. It's kind of very dark, but
Mhm.
when I first heard it, it always stayed with me. It's a very creepy quote. There's a serial killer named Gary Heidnik, and he kidnapped women and he kept them in his basement. And his goal was to get them pregnant, and he wanted to create a master race of his kids. I mean, he was very he was schizophrenic, so he had these crazy ideas, and he tortured the women, and he was a cannibal also. And one of his eccentricities was that he would go for periods of time without speaking at all, but not like like a couple of hours without speaking. He would go like months to a year, and he wouldn't say a single word. So like he'd be in jail, and he would not. He would go like a year, and he just would not speak. And sometimes someone asked him, why do you do that? Why do you stop speaking? And his answer kind of referenced the fact that he's a cannibal. But what he said was, "The devil put a cookie in my mouth." And when I first read that quote, I thought that was like the creepiest thing I think I'd ever heard anyone say. And that's a quote that just has stuck with me. I mean, I don't have that many quotes that I have memorized. But I think I
Mhm.
actually used that in my high school, as my high school yearbook quote.
Oh, nice.
So it's
My
not
quote,
inspiring or anything, but
my quote, let's see if you recognize it. I'm not going to tell you where it came from. Uh, you don't retire from writing. It's like the mafia. Once you're in the club, you're in it for life.
yeah, that's from my the original introduction to this book, H2 2.0.
Yes.
And I wrote that a while ago. I'm not sure if I still agree with it because I know I do know a lot of people who get like burned out and they stop writing. It just I for me it's not that way. I don't feel like that'll ever happen. I mean, I never want to retire from writing.
Right. And you know what? One of these days, David, we're gonna be picked up by somebody. They're just gonna say, you know what? We're gonna make a movie out of this book. You know, and you got to
Yeah, I
believe
hope
it.
so.
And that's why we continue to write. You know, because we hope that it'll be picked up. You know, I like to write. Somebody asked me one time, why did you write this? Because I wanted to read it. You know, so that's why I wrote it. And kind of like
Yeah,
you said, I let the characters write it. So, um, I guess the noble thing would be I write it because, I just want other people to enjoy it. But the truth is, come on, man, someone gives you a contract and wants to sign it off and buy it, make it into a movie, we're going to be like, right on. Yeah, we definitely want that, you know?
yeah,
So,
absolutely.
David Tamarin, you can find all of his books, and you've collaborated with a couple books, haven't you, with someone?
Yeah, there's a Russian writer named Roman Neznayu, and we're doing a
Mhm.
series of books. And when we finish all the short stories, we're going to put it out as a book, and it's going to be called Two Lunatics, One Book. But what we're doing for now is each month we're releasing a story, and it's on Kindle
Mhm.
Unlimited. So if you have Kindle Unlimited, it's free, and they're
Mhm.
pretty short stories, like 10,000 words or so. And we've released two so far, and then we have plans to release books for the rest of the year. We've already written a lot of the stories, and then we had one story that was translated into Russian and published in a Russian horror anthology.
David Tamarin, Tamarin. You can find all of his books on Amazon. Just type his name into the search bar, and a whole list of stuff will come out. I highly suggest this book, HU 2.0. We're also going to be doing hurting my toys. I have a hard time with I keep wanting to say toes. Hurting my toys, spiritual suicide. We're promoting that book also, but any of his books, if you're into horror, if you're into splatterpunk, I highly recommend. I gave a review on your book, this book hates you, and I put raw splatterpunk at its finest. The book, as it states in the intro, is an entity. It is alive. It is a must read. So,
Thank
David,
you,
good luck to you. Thank you
thank you.
for being on the show, and hopefully, when you get other books out, we can have you on the show again to help promote it, and
Yeah,
and
yeah, I'd love to come back.
we'll have
Definitely.
more subscribers at that point too, right? That's what we're
Yeah,
hoping. Well,
definitely.
also before we sign off, and we're gonna put this in at some point, I'm sure. Jay's working on it. He's the tech guru, but we want to have 100 subscribers on YouTube by March 12th. That's the goal. And if we reach 100 subscribers on YouTube on the Writers Lounge podcast page, I will Rocky style 3 raw eggs for everybody to watch. And I've never done it before. So, like, if you've done it before, it's no big deal. But I've never done it before. So, I thought, you know what, that'll be a good goal. So, invite your friends, invite your families, get them to just hit that red button. It doesn't cost nothing, just so you can see me gag on a bunch of raw eggs, right? So thank you,
Yeah,
David, for joining us. It was a joy, and you have a good evening.
you too. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Stay on for just a little bit until we stop the live recording,
Okay.
and we're waiting on our tech person to do that. So while we're sitting here, what are you planning on doing? Are you watching the hockey game, USA versus Canada? Are you
I'm
going to watch it?
not. No, I'm actually not that big of a sports fan. I love skiing, and I've skied most of my life, but I generally don't like to watch sports.